But it's this sort of thing, though, that might make Tony Khan a little less likely to want to work with WWE in any way, shape, or form. And if Lex Luger gets what he wants, he's going to have to. Because Fightful Select had a report this week that with Lex Luger being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame this year, he has informed the company that Sting is his preferred choice to induct him. And WWE is said to be making efforts to bring Sting in for the Hall of Fame ceremony. He's already going to be in Las Vegas that weekend for other events and signings that are taking place. The issue is Sting is under under a Legends type deal with AEW. I don't know what they call it, but that's basically what it is. And he has supposedly told people that he probably will not be able to do it because of that deal. Now, if someone is leaking that WWE is, quote, making efforts to bring Sting in for the Hall of Fame, it's probably their way of getting it out publicly to try to put pressure on Tony Khan and make him look bad if he ends up saying no. Right? Put it out there, plant the seed, get people pushing Tony on social media, which they know he's on all the time, to do the right thing. Look, as a fan, I hope it happens. I think it would be really shitty if Lex wants his best friend to induct him, and Sting is retired now. He's not even an active wrestler anymore. And he's available, but he can't do it because of some tit for tat between the two companies. You know, he's taken shots at WWE before. Let's not pretend that Triple H hasn't taken shots at AEW before, and that WWE hasn't tried to fuck them in various ways in the past, right? That's the wrestling business. But for something like this, and for as much reverence as Tony clearly has for Sting, I mean, just look at the way he treated him and booked him his entire AEW run. I would like to think that Tony would allow it, even if it was a deal where WWE would have to bill him as an AEW legend or something. I really don't see what the issue is there, especially with WWE having no problem now acknowledging TNA and their stars and having their stars on their own television show. It's not like they don't play with others. They're playing with others now in a way that they never did before. Now, my attitude was very different about the Billy Gunn thing a few years ago. You know, WWE at the time was having its gazillionth DX reunion on Raw. They were in Brooklyn, and they wanted Billy on the show. And he wanted to do it. Road Dogg even texted him about it, and it sounded like it might actually happen, and he was all excited. And talks were far enough along that they were planning his travel for that show. All Tony Khan asked for in return, supposedly, it wasn't any kind of a trade or, money or anything like that. Simply acknowledge him as a current AEW star. Maybe even put the AEW logo on the bottom of the screen when they introduce him, something along those lines. And they were open to it. They were planning for it. But then at the last minute, I don't know what happened, but they changed their mind and they said no. And at that time, I said, fuck that. Tony shouldn't let him do it at all. This wasn't long after the Brawl Out scrum, where Tony had that meltdown about WWE booking against them, on Labor Day weekend and contract tampering allegations and all of this terrible stuff that he claimed they were doing. And he felt very strongly about what was going on, and clearly it bothered him. And if he felt that strongly about it, then he would have been right to tell Billy, no, permission denied. I'm not going to let you go on their TV show to play degenerate with all of your friends. But he was willing to do it, and WWE was going to do it until they didn't. Petty bullshit. I see this a little bit differently. I don't know if Tony still thinks there's contract tampering going on. He probably does. But this is Sting inducting his best friend into their Hall of Fame. And yes, they use the Hall of Fame as a marketing tool. We all know this. Whatever your thoughts are on the WWE Hall of Fame and what it is or isn't, if Tony wants to stand his ground and say no, you know what? I can't begrudge him for it, especially after WWE told Luger and DDP that they couldn't appear on camera during Sting's retirement match last year. Couldn't even show them sitting in the crowd. Like, they were there, but they were never acknowledged because of their Legends deals with WWE. I don't know if Tony even bothered asking Sting, to be honest. Right? It's possible he didn't even bother. If he says no in this situation here, I would understand it. But as a fan, I don't think it would be such a heavy lift to let the man induct his best friend on his special night. If he doesn't, I would imagine DDP would be his second choice, but it really should be Sting. Like, their careers have been linked almost from the very first day that Luger came to the NWA. If there is one man who is the perfect person to be inducting Lex Luger into the Hall of Fame or giving an induction speech and talking about him and talking about his career, it is Sting. And there really is no good reason, especially if he's going to be in Vegas that weekend, there's no good reason for him not to be there doing it. But on the subject of the Hall of Fame, we have another rumored inductee. This comes per WrestleVotes. Now, Earthquake and Typhoon, the natural disasters, they are already said to be going in. They have not been formally announced, although Typhoon did an interview with Bill Apter, and he admitted he got the call from WWE about going in this year. So, I mean, one of the alleged inductees has already admitted it. The latest name, though, like John Tenta, is someone that is no longer with us, and that is the Ugandan giant Kamala. Is said to have been discussed internally for induction into this year's Hall of Fame class, and he would join Triple H, Lex Luger, Michelle McCool, and the Natural Disasters. So it looks like the only name missing would be whoever the celebrity inductee is going to be, because they always have a celebrity inductee. Kamala is one of the more memorable names from that 1980s wrestling period that I grew up on. He had success in Memphis. He had success in Mid-South and World Class, before coming to WWE. And it was actually Andre the Giant that got him into the company. They had worked some matches together in other territories like World Class. And Andre told him, you need to come to New York. We need to work together there. And that was his foot in the door. He worked with Hogan on top. He's always been complimentary of how Hogan treated him. Not so much Vince McMahon and how much he got paid. But Hogan would always tell him, when they were working together, get your money. I'm getting mine. Get your money. But then he would go to Vince and talk to him about how how much he thought he should be making. He wasn't making enough. He should be making more. And Vince would tell him, if you think you can make more somewhere else, you're free to leave. And so he did. And then Vince brought him back many years later for that run where he, worked with The Undertaker, and then they turned him babyface. He claimed the reason that Vince brought him back, he believes, was because Vince found out that he had contacted a lawyer about suing the company for merch money that he thought he was owed for all the action figures. He said he had two of them, 2 action figures, and in the 5 years that they were out, maybe he made 30 grand off of them, which does sound very low. Because I know those action figures, especially the LJN ones, and I mean, there were guys that made a lot more than that on those figures. So he contacts a lawyer, and they're going to want to see sales receipts and such. And lo and behold, Vince, not only does Kamala get a phone call, he gets a phone call personally from Vince McMahon to offer him a job to come back. And he took it. And then his lawyer calls him later on and says, so I see you're back in the WWF. I assume you want to drop this litigation. And he's like, yeah, we might as well. But that was one thing he was always adamant about his entire career, was how he felt he was severely underpaid during his time there, especially when he was working big names like Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior and the Undertaker. It wasn't just like Kamala was an underneath guy. For a good portion of his run, he was a main event guy. He was working with main event players. He claimed for his match with the Undertaker at SummerSlam, when they were at Wembley in 92, 80,000 people, that he only made $13,000 for that show. Now, he claims The Undertaker made $500,000 for that one match, which I don't believe for a second. Okay, let's just say that. I don't believe that for not even for a millisecond. Especially back then in 92, nobody was making $500,000 for one night, unless their name was Vince McMahon. Okay, he was the only one who and even Vince McMahon probably wasn't making quite that much money. Business was not exactly booming in 92. Not even Savage or the Warrior made that much money that night. I don't believe that for a second, but that's what he says the Brooklyn Brawler told him. Because Steve Lombardi, he also worked behind the scenes. Pat Patterson had left his briefcase behind one night at I think it was the Nassau Coliseum, and the briefcase was open. And so Brawler is browsing through the briefcase, and he sees the pay records. And he told Kamala how much it said that he made for SummerSlam. And Kamala said that it was spot on. He guessed the exact number that he made. And then he said that Brawler told him Undertaker made $500,000. Now, whatever Undertaker actually made, I'm sure it was more, probably a lot more than what they paid Kamala, as it should have been, because he was the bigger name at the time. But the gap should not have been that big. Whatever the gap actually was, it should not have been that big. But he told Slam Wrestling years ago that despite all of that, he had no regrets about, working for WWE. He was always proud to tell people that he did. He only regrets not getting paid. This is what he said. He goes, most of the guys I work with throughout my run with the WWF are all wealthy guys. They're all good guys. They're doing good. I'm the only one who had to file bankruptcy. I have a home. My home is paid off. I did pay cash for it, but it didn't come through the WWF. It came through Bill Watts. I ended up having to drive a truck and all that kind of stuff. I've never been a drunk or a drug user or had any bad habits, so I didn't throw any money away. I just didn't make any. And he had some really bad health issues. I think it was tied into his diabetes later in life. I know he lost both of his legs due to complications from diabetes. He died 5 years ago from those complications. And he also got COVID, which didn't help. But he will go down as one of the more recognizable characters from that golden era of wrestling. And Mike Johnson, in a Q&A on PWInsider.com, he was asked this week about Ken Shamrock possibly going into the Hall of Fame. And Johnson said that he has heard talk of him going in this year, but nothing that he could confirm. But Shamrock does live in Nevada, which is where WrestleMania is this year. I think Shamrock is absolutely worthy of a Hall of Fame induction. He was a popular figure during the Attitude Era, who had success during one of the most prosperous eras in the history of this company. He won multiple championships. He was part of Vince McMahon's corporation. He introduced through him, they introduced the concept of the Lion's Den match, right? He's got his own match in WWE, and also introduced the tap out. Now, in wrestling, it was really Taz and ECW who introduced the idea of tapping out to a submission hold, because he would submit guys with the Taz mission. It's like a choke, right? They couldn't verbally submit, so they would tap out. But it wasn't popularized widely until Shamrock came to WWE in 1997, and now it's the standard. It's the standard way people submit in wrestling matches, right? You hardly ever see verbal submissions anymore. You don't see verbal submissions. You don't see people nodding their head like Mr. Perfect did when he lost the Intercontinental title to Bret Hart at SummerSlam, or Ric Flair when he lost the title to Bret in 92, bobbing his head up and down. That's just the way it was done back then. But now everybody taps out. So Shamrock's influence is still felt to this day. And I hope it happens. He was persona non grata in that company for so many years, and I'm still not sure why. I don't think he is either. But after he signed a Legends deal with them last year, I think the chances of a Hall of Fame induction, it seemingly became very real. So I'd like to see it. I hope it happens.